If you don't know me, my name's Angie Schick. I'm the program manager for the BCIC-New Ventures competition. Thanks for coming. If you didn't see it, there's coffee just outside, and you can help yourself to that throughout the evening. And there's water, I think, just in that corner right there. Don't get used to this. We are here because our usual spot is just down the road across the corner at 500 Granville Street. We'll be going there for the rest of the series starting April 1st in 2 weeks. But they wanted to shoot a movie there this week, so they said, hey, do you want to come here for a week? So we said, all right, let's do it. So that's why we're here, but it's very fancy. And it's less fancy over there, so yeah, enjoy this week. So some housekeeping. The washrooms are downstairs, so just go out this door and then down the stairs and you'll find the washrooms. The slides Dave is talking from tonight are already on our website, newventuresbc.com/blog, and you should be able to find them right there. We are webcasting tonight, so there are people watching from all around the province. Hello. And we just implemented a system, or we're trialing it this week, for people watching online. There's a number you can text. You should see it in your webcasting screen. If you text that number, if you have any questions throughout the evening, we'll get that question. And at the intervals when Dave will ask for if there are any questions throughout the evening, we'll ask your questions on your behalf. If you'd like, I think preferably if you want to identify yourself and where you're from, that's even better. But we'll let you do that. If you are here and you want to ask a question, so people on the webcast can hear you. All of you have microphones, so this is the only week that I don't have to run around with my microphone. If you want to use it when you ask a question, there's just this black button underneath the microphone, and it'll turn the light. There'll be a light here that turns red. That means it's on, and just please turn it on before you ask a question so everyone can see. Otherwise, I am going to remind you, so next week it's not a seminar, it's a networking event. Next Wednesday from 5:30 to 8:30, and if you haven't already signed up, please come on down. It is included in the 10 weeks if you sign up for the whole 10 weeks. It's pretty fun. Like, we have a whole bunch of mentors already coming, and I mean, they like talking to each other, but they really want to talk. They really want to talk to you. They really want to talk to new companies and see what's happening. So definitely encourage you to come out, especially if you're thinking about entering the competition or maybe on the fence. It's a good way for you to kind of decide if this is for you or not. Most people will go and say, yes, I totally want to do this. But, there's always a few people who go and say, yeah, I think I'm going to just do the seminars. So it's a good time for you to come and suss it out. And lastly, I'm just going to thank my title sponsor, which is BCIC, the BC Innovation Council, and all our other wonderful sponsors were shown earlier on the screen. Hope you saw them. And I think that's it. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to pass it over to Dave Thomas. So thanks for coming, Dave.
Thank you very much, Angie. So I always figured that one of the pinnacles of public life would be being asked to speak at Stonehenge. And I can't do that. Obviously, I haven't been invited, but this is as close as we get. One of the things I always wondered what were the people who sat on the right-hand side like at Stonehenge and the people who sat on the left-hand side? And there's definitely a minority over here on the left-hand side. What do you think? What does that say about them? Who knows? Good question. All right. So one of the mysteries of life we'll never figure out. So this is who I am. You can easily find me by phone or email. And one of the things that I do is I'm part of Rocket Builders. It's a consulting company. We've been in business for 15 years now. We work with early stage technology companies, and our specialty is go-to-market. In other words, how do you get into the marketplace and how do you succeed? We do a couple of things. One of the things we did in February, which is really a large marketing event for ourselves, is the Red to Rocket list. And if you look that up, you'll see many of the best tech companies in the province profiled as either life sciences companies, clean tech companies, or IT. Also, I've been involved with the venture capital side and the angel side of different types of things. And we just had the Canadian Financing Forum again in February. The Banff Venture Forum is a great event. It is in late September, and it's in Banff, Alberta. And between the Canadian Financing Forum and the Banff Venture Forum, you have two of the bigger venture capital events in Western Canada, actually the two largest ones. I also have a non-day job, really more of a hobby. I run a sailing school. So occasionally I'll use an example of how, even for an analog business, something as simple or as much a call it a standard business where we provide sailing lessons for children and adults. Marketing, internet marketing, and understanding the customer is very, very important. And also I'll talk a little bit about a second site we have in China and how very different that is. So today, we're really going to go through and talk about a lot of the things you would work on if you're managing a product. And if you have an early stage company and you're deciding what you're going to do and all the other pieces, you're really managing what that product will be as it goes into the marketplace. And we all think of product management in terms of Pepsi and Coke and big brand names and everything else, but there is as much rigor and as much need to do this properly in the tech sector with new early stage products as there is in large consumer products where there's a whole brand team that works on what's Dr. Pepper supposed to be positioned as this week. So one of the things we'll do is we'll go through a whole series of steps, market research, how is technology adopted, because quite often there is an interest in new technology. How do we understand the customer or the consumer? And as part of that, I won't touch on it very much, we also have to understand the value chain. Because although consumers would really like to consume all sorts of stuff a certain way, very often it is given to them only according to the rules which the companies that control the industry provide, right? Anybody who owns a cell phone in British Columbia understands how that works, okay? So also we'll talk about what is the whole product, whole solution, how do you position your product? And positioning your product is totally different than what are the technical features. We'll talk a little bit about pricing, some of the things not to do. And then finally, we'll go into an area which is really more and more important for any type of company, that's internet marketing, and how do you measure on the internet, something that's really important. So for the questions you will be asked in the New Ventures BC competition, the material here will hopefully speak to the questions that are listed on the slide. So, as I said before, there's a whole series of things we'll work on. And one of the key things at the very bottom is how to measure marketing effectiveness. Everything we do to go and message the marketplace, try to message the customers or potential customers we have, is something we have to understand in advance what we think it's going to do. Then we measure and analyze the response to see if it's correct. Come on. All right, so one of the things that is really important to understand from the outset is that most companies will come into the marketplace with a minimum viable product. And one of the other things that they'll come into the marketplace with and need is a revenue model. So if you go in and say, I'm going to have a freemium business model, it means I'll have a free product and a premium one. And if you've only figured out what the free part is and have no idea how you're going to get the premium part, then you have a real problem in the marketplace. So one of the key components here is a product that works, one that you can evolve through successive iterations of the product, a revenue model which you believe will actually generate revenue. You have to know who the consumer is, but also who will pay. And then finally, an addressable market. And a lot of the time people say, I need a huge addressable market. Well, it's correct, you do need a huge addressable market eventually, but it's a reality for most companies that they need to be able to sell to a specific group of people in order to survive, in order to prove that the product is valued by those that use it. So what you want is a clearly defined niche market that will help you, because that niche market is referred to by other niche markets, and an engine of growth. So how many of you have heard of Hootsuite? Okay, maybe a better question, is there anybody who has not heard of Hootsuite? So when Hootsuite started out with their product, one of the key things they did was they allowed you to manage your image and all the different tweets that came about you or your product on Twitter. So how many users did Twitter have when Hootsuite started to provide their product into the marketplace? Is anybody, you don't have to be super old to know the answer, but what's the guess? How many users did Twitter have then? 4? 12? Bigger number? Who's got a guess? When Ryan Holmes and the rest picked Twitter and said, we're going to hitch our wagon at the beginning to Twitter, how many users did Twitter have? 25? It's actually 5 million. So only 5 million. So one of the things you go, wow, 5 million potential users or potential customers, that's good. It's not bad. And you can find them because they're using Twitter. So how many does Twitter have today? How many people have a Twitter account? It's what, over 300 million, right? and how many use it all the time is significantly over 100 million, or use it on a regular basis enough to say that they are an active user. So what Hootsuite did, as well as building the right product and then being able to evolve so it works with all different social media and build the product out, is they picked a market that had a very clear engine of growth. In other words, as they worked with social media, the number of people using it would grow significantly, and their ability to address that market, they would get towed along by growth in the marketplace. So one of the key things I want to do is understand all the different things that are going on, and I'm going to go about and talk about market research first. So one of the key things I really want to do is begin with the end in mind. So I want to sit down and say, I have a certain budget, I have a certain ability to message the marketplace. So maybe I just have a small company, and I know that I can be active on the internet in all different ways, and I can try to create certain sort of visibility for my product or for my company. What exactly do I do? I mean, it's hard to say, oh yeah, I can do all sorts of stuff. Is it going to have the desired effect? So one of the things I really want to understand is, what are my key research questions? What do I need to know? Then I can put it all out and say, because I know this, what am I going to do? All right? Then I can say, this is my plan, and either I'm going to budget time, or I'm going to budget money, or both. So I sit down and say, so if I understand the market, I understand really what the market is interested in, I understand how the market is configured. And that's something that's really important too, is understanding the value chain. All sorts of people could want to do all sorts of stuff with the healthcare data and all the other stuff. But it may be that it's something that just average citizens are not allowed to access at will. All right? There's all sorts of different regulations that go in. And finally, how will I take a part of the marketplace and say, yes, I have the resources to go out and message that part of the market. So one of the best things to remember is, whenever you get confused, go to the store. The customer has all the answers and all of the money. And that's a quote from Sam Walton. And one of the things he's talking about here is the value proposition. And it's not the price, it's not the features, it can be a whole combination of things, but one of the best things to think about is, what value does it provide for the user? What value does it provide for the owner or the company that has acquired it? And how is that different from the value offered by either a competitor's product or a substitute, or by non-adoption? Is it going to make things better, and how good is that value? So I can describe markets a whole bunch of ways. Size, trends, is it growing? Are there market segments? How many of you think it'd be really good to try to sell new stuff to newspapers? All right, is that a growth market? It's not, all right? There's a newspaper closes every week in Canada. So the traditional print media is a dying market, but at the same time, evolving out of that is a whole digital media market, which is becoming more and more what people expect. So you went through a stage where people didn't really know, do I like print? Do I like to read stuff online? Now the only question is, how can it be packaged and how can it be distributed to people? So the trends, every segment is different. All those things are different for different people. And then finally, there's a couple other things that are really important. Understanding the pain in the marketplace. I think I was talking with Stuart. This is Stuart Marshall, somebody I've worked with a fair bit on some of these seminars in the past. And one of the things he was saying is that, what is a necessity and what is something which is a nice to have? In other words, there's a real difference between the two. So is there true customer pain? Is there something that makes a difference? You go back to am I selling aspirin or am I selling vitamins? Aspirin solves a significant pain right now. Vitamins is something for the future. And also, is there a problem in the value chain? I mean, I think all of us sit and look at a lot of the things which are now becoming more and more on the web. Registration for something. And it's very clear that taking registration systems, a lot of database applications, all sorts of things, and letting the internet make the value chain smoother is something we all desire. So very clearly, as industry after industry is restructured, there will be what's called value chain pain. They're trying to reduce the cost and trying to make it smoother. And then finally, what are the customer requirements? And more than anything, if I want to sell something, how do I work with channel? Who already is active in that marketplace? Anybody here have a company that's going to go and sell stuff up in the oil patch in northern Alberta? Anybody here? That's their shtick? Nobody. A lot of money up there. Okay. All right, so one of the things is that if you're going to do something in a marketplace that's very clearly defined, understanding how the value chain works, who's active and who isn't active, because quite often it can be difficult to be a new arrival in a marketplace. So when I segment the market, I can sit down and say there's revolutionary products that really change things. And then there's evolutionary stuff. Most of the new things that we do right now today is evolutionary. And the segments are really well defined. I make things better. And sort of over time, the challenge is to refine or define how things can be better. And a lot of the time, customers fit, or customers insist that a vendor fits their solution into something they're used to buying. What are examples of revolutionary products? What do you think? Over the last 100 years, what's revolutionary? Personal computer, yeah, I agree with that. What else? Last 100 years. Sorry? So the internet's pretty good. That internet thing, as Homer Simpson calls it, it's still here. It's changing a lot of stuff for us. You go back in time, things like artificial light. All those things are really revolutionary products, things that really define things. You also have certain, I call them items that happen in the marketplace, where all of a sudden something goes from being specialized where a few people will be able to use it to everybody has it. So one of the things I would argue is that mobile devices that everybody wants to have are really a revolutionary product because it's a prediction of what will happen in the future. So if you look at Apple with a combination of the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, then you very clearly, in my opinion, have the beginning of a revolutionary product series. I don't think Google Glass, and I'll be truthful, I am not buying one of those stupid watches. Okay, I don't think they fit in those categories. I think they're going to be second-rate products. But the other three very clearly were the beginning of a whole revolutionary product series as everything has gone to a handheld device, something that's important. So why do I segment? One of the realities is I don't have enough money to go and talk to everybody. So I spend some time working as a mentor in residence at Simon Fraser University. I work with early stage companies at a number of the different accelerators. When somebody comes to me and says, anybody could use my product, I'm like, boy, you need to get a job at Microsoft. You know, it's nice that anybody could use it, but the reality is anybody's not going to use it, and everybody is not going to use it. That's the purview of about 20 or 30 companies worldwide. It's very seldom the purview of a new early stage company. One of the key things is at the beginning you have very limited resources. I have to go and figure out if I can find the people who will adopt my product, the people who will be the early adopters, if you want to call them. Is there a target customer group with a use case to provide significant value? And the use case is the key component in it. When they use it, it makes a lot more value for them and things are a lot better. What this enables us then to do is decide to focus in a specific area. I need to make less broad a product, okay? I can say I don't compete with IBM, I don't compete with Microsoft because I do something they don't do. And if I'm successful with one product, let's say I go and sell something to, I'll talk about the sailing school. We do pretty well with kids camps, all right? It then enables me to sell not the same product, but a slightly different modified product to young adults. Right? So I can migrate from one segment into another, and I can take success in one area and migrate into a second one. It also allows you to, over time, take the benefit of succeeding in a marketplace and using that to then grow more rapidly. So why do I do this? So if you listen to a lot of the pundits from Silicon Valley or other places, one of the key things is that usually, if you're an investor, you have risk that comes in three categories. I have product risk, I have market risk, and I have people risk. And one of the things you look at is they usually believe that the big problem with companies is lack of market and lack of market acceptance. So all sorts of companies build great products. The products are really, really good, and they usually have really good people running them. And if they don't have great people running them, it's easy to change out the people. And so a lot of the investors will do that. But at the end of the day, when they usually figure out why things didn't work, it's because there was never market acceptance. So getting to really good product market fit really matters. There's a venture capital company in Vancouver that's been in the market for something like 25 years. And every once in a while, they'll do failure analysis. They'll take the investments they made and say, why did they fail? You know, sit down and go, you know, we put a couple $1,000,000 in this or whatever we did, and we didn't end up getting our money back or making money on it. What was the reason for this not succeeding? I think they did that. One of this company did that with 40 other investments and figured in 38 cases that the problem was the market. And it was only twice the problem was product. And they always felt that they had enough people, but they just never got to the stage where the product market fit was as good as it needed to be. All right, so why is there's a gentleman called Steve Blank who's been very successful in the marketplace, and there's a little video in here. If we could cue the video, that'd be great.
I realized that this might actually be a fundamental problem with most startups, is that actually startups were burning money by starting sales and marketing and business and development activities either on the web or physically in the real world way too early. Because if you think about it, here we are in Silicon Valley. At least those of us physically here, not those watching on TV. But for those of us here in the Valley, we take technical risks with products all the time. Investors put huge bets on all of you to do innovative things. Anybody have any idea what percentage of startups fail because their technology fails? Any idea? How many think it's over 50% of startups fail because the technology didn't work? All right? Over 50%. Over 25%. How many think it's over 25% fail because technology doesn't make it? Turns out less than 10% of startups fail because the engineers were just wrong. Turns out most startups, and I'll leave life sciences aside for a second, most startups in every other field other than life sciences, over 90% fail because they didn't find a market and customers. Full stop. Big idea. Well, if that's the case, and go ask your favorite venture capitalist or next guest, and you're going to have a lot of them in this class and other class. Go ask them. If that's the case, why is it that we have tons of methodologies to measure and help us getting the product right, but no methodologies to help us get the stuff about customers and markets right? Anybody ever been in a company in product management or know what product management people do? And some people in the back of the room. There's entire tool sets on how to manage technology risk. Tons. But there are almost no tools to manage customer and market risk. Well, think about this. You're an entrepreneur. I have a great idea. Good, let's go build it. Oh, good, let's go raise money. Oh, let's go sell it. You know what the next step is? Oh, we're out of business. Because most of us grow up reading these wonderful stories about all the people who made a ton of money at Google and Facebook and other companies that, these are great examples. Do you ever notice they don't bring in the people who you didn't hear about? Because you wouldn't come. How about bringing in the people who said, you know, I cratered my last 7 companies. Let me tell you why. You'd go, well, I don't want to be one of those. I want to be Google and Facebook. That's whose presentations I want to hear. Any idea what the ratio is between the Googles and Facebooks and other startups? You know how many companies fail every year in Silicon Valley? Anybody want to guess? You know what the ratio is? I'm sorry? Over 1,000 to 1. Now, one of the nice things about human nature is every one of you is going to be convinced that you're going to be Google and Facebook. You have to be, right? I mean, that's the passion of an entrepreneur. You have to be convinced, you know, those other 999 companies, they were just idiots. I'm much smarter than them because I have a better idea and we're cool.
All right. So Steve Blank is, as I said, he's a professor at Stanford now. He's been with 4 startups, all of which succeeded. One of his original companies was Qualcomm, so he's done really well. If you look for interesting things to research on the net or to read, he is one of the better people to follow on the internet. I had the opportunity to ask him a question. I was at one of his talks and listening, and I said, "Can you give us an example of something?" And he said, "Well, here's an example." He said, "I'm at Stanford. One of the classes I teach has got a whole series of it's an engineering class, graduate engineers." And he said, "So this group went out and built what he said is, in his terms, is it's the best automated lawnmower I've ever met. You know, there's this thing would cut your grass, drive up and down. It was robotic, did all sorts of things." And they went, "Wow, it works like a charm." Their problem was the competition was guys who charged $8 an hour. So really great product, but they couldn't make any money. Or they couldn't, it was way cheaper to hire somebody for $8 an hour than to buy the robot. So there's always the guy who likes robots who'll buy it, but that's not a market. Okay, it's one of the key things to remember. Yeah.
So would you blame the market or the product? I mean, why build a product that isn't going to sell?
Well, I think in this case, what they're saying is they researched whether the product would work in the marketplace, but they didn't research whether they could make money. What was the price point for the product? So it's like at Harvard Business School, they always say, will the dog eat the dog food and will the dog pay you for the dog food? So it's the combination of the two. And he said, well, the second thing is that they've also figured out that their machine with a bit of modification is pretty good at picking lettuce. So if you go, Imperial Valley is just around the corner from Silicon Valley. It's where all the fresh produce is grown in the US. So they've built essentially an automated lettuce picker. He said they got to figure out though, apparently it chews up about 1% of the lettuces, and that isn't appreciated by farmers. So that may be a better market for them because there's a lot more value in picking lettuce than cutting lawns. All right, and that's one of the key things. It's not just the product, but is the market actually going to be interested in the product? So one of the things you're trying to do is, he says, is take your hypotheses about what you think is going to happen and turn it into reality. So if you're a big company, you're like, you can be IBM, you can be Microsoft. They execute in a marketplace. They're everywhere. Everybody understands them. Startups search for a business model as much as searching for acceptance of their product. And one of the better angel investors in Vancouver, very well-known angel investor, tries to put companies that he meets into 2 categories. He says, if I meet a company and they've got a minimum viable product and they made a prediction, they're going to ship it, they're going to put it out there, and then they're going to measure the results and repeat, and then see what happens again. And then they'll do that maybe once, hopefully only once, maybe a couple more times than that, and they'll prove that their product fits the market and that they get to reality as fast as possible. I find it interesting to talk to a company like that. If I meet guys who are going to ship it and just see what happens, he says, I try to end the meeting as fast as possible because I don't think they will really succeed. In other words, they have to have an idea of what they think it will do and predict the future. Otherwise, they're just shooting off into a black hole. It's not worth it. It's not going to happen. Actually, there is another video under the next button. Could we click on that one? See if it comes up. No. If you go back a slide, please. If you click on the next symbol. Maybe not. Maybe I took it out. Yeah, there we are. Click on that one. That's the one. Thank you. Could you turn the volume up? It's really low on volume. So we all hear Apple. Apple says that they don't do market research. They just build market-changing products, right? In the olden days, they did market research like everybody else. And they figured out what things were going to happen and all the other stuff. And hopefully this will turn up in a bit. It'll get going. I apologize for the quality of the video, but it's from 1990. How many of you have already seen this? This be the odd person who's seen this one before. So a little bit of history, like old guys like me can tell you the history of NX because we were around, all right? But in reality, this is this company that Steve Jobs formed after he left Apple the first time.
Hi. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Steve Jobs, and this is the first of one of many Chalk Talks we're going to have this year together. The subject of this one is really important, which is who is our target customer, why are they selecting our products over our competitions, and what distribution channels are we going to use to reach these customers. A lot of light bulbs have come on over the last 90 days. I've had the good fortune to be with a lot of you out in the field, meeting customers, getting firsthand information as to what they're doing with our products. You have fed a lot of information to the management of this company, and we've done a lot of thinking and looked at the data, and all of a sudden out of this data, some very, very important things have come to light. I want to share them with you today. We've had historically a very hard time figuring out exactly who our customer was. And I'd like to show you why. When we first look at the workstation marketplace, it looks something like this. And the biggest player, as you know, in the workstation marketplace is Sun. Second biggest player is HP Apollo. Third biggest player is DEC. And IBM with the RS-6000 is now in the game as well. And then, outside the workstation marketplace, the very large market for PCs and Macintoshes, the traditional personal computer market. Now, we looked at the workstation marketplace and we said, wow, we have multitasking. We have great networking just like the workstations. We use Unix. We have a pretty good development environment. So we're a lot like these folks. But then again, these folks don't really care about user interface, or at least they haven't been able to execute on it if they do. They don't really have great third-party application software. And these are not machines for mere mortals. So we're not like them at all. And then we look at the PCs. And we do strive to get a suite of application software that allows us to be just like these folks. We do strive to attain ease of use, and actually are easier to use than even a Macintosh today. So we're a lot like these folks. But then again, we have multitasking and networking that is an order of magnitude beyond what you can do with a PC today. So over the last year, we've oscillated back and forth between thinking that the PCs and the Macs were our competitors, and this is where we want it to be, or the workstations were our competitors, and this is where we want it to be. In essence, are we an easier-to-use workstation, or are we a more powerful PC? And had it not been for a revelation, if you will, 5 or 6 months ago, we probably would still be oscillating today. And what that revelation was that somebody turned up the power of our microscope a little bit, and we saw something very important. And what we saw was that the workstation marketplace is really not just one workstation marketplace, but two. There's the traditional half, which is what we've come to know and love, science and engineering, which does indeed look just like this. But there's a new half emerging, which we're calling the professional half. That is, professionals that are not scientists and engineers who want the power of workstations. And inside this marketplace, there are several sub-markets. Publishing, the high end of the publishing market, tech pubs. Medical, a lot of database-driven applications. Higher education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Legal markets in here. Many, many markets are in here. And what's very interesting is Sun is the only company that seems to have eked out a beachhead over here. And our data says that in 1990, Sun sold around 40,000 computers into this market and had about an 80% market share. So the entire professional workstation market in 1990 was about 50,000 units. And Sun had the majority share. That's why we didn't see it before. It was such a small blip compared to the workstation marketplace or, of course, the PC marketplace that it did not show up on our radar screen. But we've seen it now, and it's good that we have, because this is a marketplace that we can dominate. And it's a marketplace that's going to be very large. The market research data that we have, and also our gut feelings from many, many years in the industry, say that this marketplace in '91 is going to grow to about 100,000 units in size. It's going to double this year. And next year in '92, it's going to triple to about 300,000 units. That is a substantial marketplace. What is also exciting about this marketplace is that 100% of our volume goes in here. In other words, if we could ship 50,000 computers into all these markets this year, we would have a 50% market share of one of the fastest growing segments of the entire computer industry. Now, let's examine why this thing is going to grow. What is going to cause this thing to grow from 50 to 100,000 to 300,000 units? Clearly, it is not these people deciding to stop being engineers and go to business school and reemerge over here. That's not how it's going to grow. It's going to grow from two factors. Number one, these folks moving in. PCs and Mac owners deciding that they need more sophisticated networking, more sophisticated development environments, etc., deciding they need to step up to workstations. And one other class of users. There's a lot of people now using 3270 terminals.
I think we're going to stop it here because he gets into a bit more of a technical explanation on why it's going to work. It's a really neat video if you want to watch the whole thing. He's done a couple of classic things. He's figured out what the use case is. What exactly is the use case? Who are the early adopters? And then which vertical markets? And it's the same vertical markets that Apple's in today. When they think about it, it's education, higher ed, graphic designers. Those are the vertical markets. Is there growth? Yes, it's going to be 6 times bigger in a year and a half. So therefore, I'm selling into a new market. There's only one competitor, and they're not even aware of us. He then goes on to explain why he thinks that he can beat Sun. Sun no longer exists. Okay? So there's a whole bunch of things that Steve Jobs does really, really well in that video. And he goes through all the steps that you should do to figure out what you're going to do. What was the history of Next? Who here is old enough to admit they can remember all the details? Apple did buy them. It was a very interesting transaction. 2 things happened. Remember the PCs and Macs weren't good enough? PCs and Macs started getting better. So, Next had a problem in that they were getting squashed in the middle. So what ended up happening was Next was sold to Apple. And the deal, as it turned out, was the VCs got a bunch of money, about $430 million, which meant that their investment came pretty good. Steve Jobs became the CEO of Apple, and he got 25% of the stock. It's a good deal for Steve, right? So obviously that's turned out to be very, very worthwhile for him. So you can see he goes through all these things. There's another video in here we're not going to watch. We don't have enough time, but if you want to see a lighter side of top-down versus bottom-up, something to do. One of the things that Jobs did in the earlier video, he did a bottom-up analysis. 300,000 units, we can sell 50%. We can sell this many, I can capture that market. So it's not a function of there's 10 million people, each one of them spends X number of dollars on dental accessories every year. I can get 1% of the dental market. This is where I'm going to be. It's a function of the number of leads you get, what percentage are interested, what percentage buy, what's the price, that's my revenue. So it's a bottom-up financial model, and it's something that's important to do. So top-down is valuable. So we went back and we said earlier on an addressable market. If I have a big addressable market like Hootsuite had, or the potential for a large addressable market, it's good to know that. Because eventually there will be large addressable markets that people will be very interested in. Very successful company in BC a number of years ago was a company called Xantrex. And it grew to a certain size, went public, and had over $100 million in revenue. Built all sorts of neat inverters and other electronic technology for the marketplace. Eventually, it was clear that it had to become a global player in order to expand and to grow really, really well. It would have had to go and hire about 2,000 new employees worldwide to go and compete with the big guys. The company was sold to Schneider Electric, who already had that value chain already built worldwide. So there's a number of different things that are important. In that case, the addressable market for Schneider meant that they would pay a lot of money for the potential that Xantrex had in the marketplace. And for Xantrex-New, they just didn't have the capital and time to go out and compete effectively with the bigger companies that were already there. So when you're doing this, one of the key things in your analysis is the word budget, okay? If you're doing bottom up, I can say I'm interested in having users, but eventually I'll have to monetize users some way. So if I'm an internet company and saying I'm going to get all these people using my system, maybe I'll have an advertiser pays model. Maybe I have a sponsor pays model. Maybe I have a freemium with a premium product. At some point, you have to monetize them and understand, you know, I can reach a certain number in the marketplace. How many of them are really going to attach to my company? How many of them can I convert into a user, convert into a paying user? What's my win rate for all of this? And that really is what enables me to do a proper bottom-up financial analysis. So basic forecasting items, I won't go into this in detail, but you can sit down and say, I can say what's the future demand and explain or understand where my revenue is going to come from. Or if I'm just going to try to grow a huge community and raise money in the background in order to pay for building the community, then I can figure out how to do that, and I can at least understand what my cost side is for doing it. So one of the things that's important if you're an internet company is that quite often you don't measure stuff initially just in terms of money. So I can have people who come to my website. I can have people who read my blog. I can have Twitter followers. And there's a difference between Twitter followers who never pay attention to those that actually read the stuff that you produce. Okay, I can have a user group. If I'm a distinct business-to-business type company, it may be that the people who are part of my user group or part of my happy clients who meet once a year are very important. I may have Facebook followers, and I may even have click-through advertising. There's a whole series of things that are important for internet companies that aren't necessarily shown in your income statement. So one of the key components in doing market research is you're looking for your headpin segment. It's accessible, there's demand, and success and leadership in this headpin segment leads to expansion into other segments. And one of the key components is that the second segment has to reference the first. In other words, if I sell to teachers at the high school level in British Columbia, and then my secondary market is public school teachers, and my third market may be university professors or university instructors, they're likely to reference each other. And it's something that's important in that they can refer to each other, and success in one moves on to the other. I said at the outset, we have a sailing school in Vancouver. We actually have two. And we're partners in a small one in Shenzhen, China. The buying behavior and the products that are of interest in the, I'll call it the water sport activity market in China are very different than here. And it's also very clear that although both of the places have the name sailing in the title, the participants there don't reference the people here. So they are not similar segments. So migrating from one to the other, they're not in the bowling alley. So it's really important to understand that when you look at markets, they may look similar, but they may not be ones which reference each other. And that's an important component. Oops. Come on. So when you're looking at this, target a single niche market segment. It doesn't have to be the big, huge addressable market. You can say, I'm going to go here because I can succeed, I can make a bit of money, or I can establish a user base. I will address other segments later. Right? I may say, I can sell really well to high school teachers. Their demand or the interest for public school or elementary school is not as great, so therefore I will migrate into that. And I leverage leadership, or at least a foothold in one, to go into adjacent segments. So in New Ventures BC, one of the key things is evaluation is, are you sure that the market opportunity you're looking at is attractive and it's worth your while? Can I make money, or do I have to live in my parents' basement on the sofa for the next 11 years? All right, you have to go through all this and make sure it's going to work. And then you know how and why you will win in the marketplace. Getting free downloads out of the App Store isn't necessarily an indicator that you'll win. How am I going to be able to go out and succeed and really make sure that people are interested in what's going on? Or is it unclear about the product? the competition. It could be that everybody is happy using an inferior substitute today, and I am unable to explain how I'm going to migrate them away from the old inferior way of doing it to the new one that I have. And if I can't do that, it's unclear why the customer can't live without it, and why we'll call it the inferior substitute is something I can't overcome. When you are participating in New Ventures BC, and I would really encourage everybody who's with a company to do that, it's worth your while to enter. One of the key things is to make sure that you are confident you can answer questions 1 and 2, and spend a fair bit of time trying to answer 1 and 2. If you have vague or broad generalities, it's not going to be all that well received. And it also isn't a good thing for you with your company either. So what I want to do is I want to go from building my product, let's say I've been coding away, or I've been pounding metal and I've got this really neat, interesting product. I want to get away from this is what the product is and this is what the features are. I want to understand what the customers value. And most of the time, somebody will buy a product for 1 or 2 key features, but they get most of the value out of a couple of features, and they may not be the same thing. All right? So they may be quite different. And you can have lots of features. And if you go and talk to 10 customers, they go, I'd really like to have this in your product. And you go, that's great. Then you got this huge list, and the engineers are happy because they get to build away forever. Doesn't mean that those customers will pay you any money for the new features. If you have differentiation, I know exactly what they want, and that's what I've built, or at least the group that I'm targeting, and I built for that group, then I'm all right. I go from being reactive to having a head pin segment, and my results, instead of seesawing back and forth all over the place, become more reliable and more predictable. So I can do research a couple of different ways. Secondary research is a lot of the stuff on the internet, all sorts of things. You can get all sorts of time and effort, or you can do primary research. And I like primary research. Rocket Builders does that a bit. One of the things we've worked on in the last number of years is we will sometimes do research under contract for companies where we will try to speak to C-level executives. So trying to get to a chief executive, CEO or COO or CFO of a large to medium-sized company is hard, and it may take up to 20 attempts at a phone call. But if you can have a conversation with that person, that primary research can be really valuable. I'm not necessarily a big fan of consumer surveys because they don't necessarily explain things properly. So let's do a survey right now. Everybody who's here, how many of you think that the price of oil has dropped a lot, right? So therefore, has the price of gasoline at the pump dropped enough? How many people think it's gone down a bit? Is that adequate, or how many of you think it needs to go down more? Did anybody understand the question? Okay. How many think that the price has gone down the right amount? Hands up. How many think that the price of oil, of gas at the gas station needs to go down a lot more? Okay, that's really interesting. Good. How many think that the price of gas at the gas station will go down as low as $1? Hands up. How many think it's going to stay the same? A lot of realists here. So do you think the big oil companies and all the guys who now own the whole value chain care about us? All right, so one of the things you have to be clear is that a consumer survey may give you some information, but it may not tell you what's really important in information. So qualitative, quantitative, quite often quantitative info, which is detail, is really important. Another example of this, let's say you're a chip company. You want to make the next chip that's going to a cell phone. It's really hard to do a demo of your product. You don't have it, right? Or if you're a clean tech hardware company, you'll spend a long time building even a prototype. So a lot of time you'll spend a fair bit of time talking to people and explaining what it is. And getting qualitative data doesn't make as much sense as having really good the other way around. Quantitative data isn't as good as having qualitative data from a few people. So if I'm a chip company, I can go and talk to some of the people who work at Intel or AMD or some of the other companies, what they think can be really important. So the source of the data is important as well. When you're doing research, don't try to sell. Try to listen to what the customer is doing. The best sales guys listen a lot. Okay, just before I get into this, I've gone through a fair bit about market research. Are there any questions there? Anything that people want to, topics to bring up or anything else? Lucas, is there anything online? Anybody outside? Okay, doke. I'd like to go through a little bit about how technology is adopted and just talk about that for a bit, and then we'll have a break after that. So one of the things, a lot of this comes from Geoffrey Moore. And a lot of people say, well, Geoffrey Moore's book is different. And Geoffrey Moore himself, you can find a really neat video online where he says how things have changed since he did, the technology adoption curve. And we'll take a look at that. That was 30 years ago. And he admits that companies like Facebook don't fit that model. All right? There are companies like that, but I think he also makes a statement that there's not a lot of companies like that. So there are adoptions or adaptions or changes to the model. And one of the key things here is who will buy and what's in it for me, and how and when will I execute marketing strategies? What will I do to match the adoption cycle with my marketing cycle? So from 2010, you'll get all sorts of stuff. You'll say all sorts of people are interested in buying new stuff. People watch video all the time. There's all sorts of new things going on. There's a belief that there are approximately 200,000 people, many of them are Silicon Valley, somewhere else, who really like new stuff. And they spend a lot of time online looking for new things. And they'll actually pay money to try new stuff just because they like trying new stuff. So there's these 200,000 people that cruise the net, and if 10 of them come to your website and buy your stuff, you may have a problem in that you've sold to these 200,000 really interesting early adopters, but it's not a market. All right? So you have to be careful that the people who are really interested in new stuff are not the people that you will be able to sell large volumes to. One of my partners carries 3 smartphones. He has this really elaborate explanation as to why he has to have 3. I think it's just because he's a techno nerd. Okay? And I keep telling him that. Like, I can live with 1. Why do you have to have 3? So he is one of the early adopters of all sorts of stuff. Again, half of US households think that they're early adopters of technology. And there's no doubt that there's a greater and greater demand for technology. But one of the things we have to understand is that people really like new technology, but it has to be sold to them the way they're used to buying it. So if all of us sit here and go, wow, I'm really interested in new stuff, but not that many of us are good at buying it. Let's say a good example is I'm really interested in all this new electronic stuff I can use to manage my house and electrical consumption, but I'm probably more likely to buy it if it's sold to me by BC Hydro than to go and research all sorts of stuff and buy it off the internet. So we're used to buying things certain ways, so the value chain is more important than anything else. 81% of all stuff on the internet begins with search. And it's very clear that people will spend a great deal of time looking on the internet and trying to figure out what they're interested in. They self-educate. It's one of the key things that people do really well. What's the difference between Future Shop and Best Buy? So one of them has service, the other doesn't. What's the difference?
The salespeople are on commission at one.
Right? Who said service? So which one of the two has service? Okay. Yeah? Yes, Future Shop has more sales guys. Yeah, which is correct. It costs more to run the business. So one of the key things is that I think actually you may get more customer service and more sales guys at Future Shop. One of the key differences is that there's commission salespeople at Future Shop. So if you want to go to the store to be educated, the commission salespeople will spend more time with you. At Best Buy, everybody's just paid by the hour, all right? But what that all translates into, it turns out that there are different types of companies, and when Future Shop was purchased by Best Buy, a friend of mine was a senior manager at Best Buy, and he said they had one area where they had, we'll just change it all and all become Best Buys in a few years. But they had one place where they just each company built a brand new store in one location, and you could see them from each other. Then they figured out that after they did the purchase, both of them, how much money they made increased dramatically. They're like, whoa, that's weird, I wonder why. Then they went down and they had a look. And they looked at it and they said, well, if people don't like what they want in Future Shop, maybe they'll go to Best Buy. And they went there and they figured out after a while that very few people ever cross the street. And they're going, wow, that's really interesting. So it turns out that people who go to Future Shop are interested in maybe negotiating, but the sales guy is allowed to give you a part of his commission. He can give you a discount. You never get a discount at Best Buy. All right, so there's that. So I'm a Best Buy guy. A Best Buy person goes and searches on the internet, looks at all the stuff that's for sale, walks in. We don't say hello to the Walmart greeter at the front door. We walk all by the guys with the flyers and everything else. We go into this section, we find the product we're interested in, do a little scan to make sure we didn't make a mistake online. We take the product and we go out and we buy it. And we, maybe we'll say hello to the cashier and that's the sort of thing. So we've done all our shopping online. Best Buy is fulfillment. So there's two distinctly different buying behaviors. And the two stores are structured for one versus the other. And the advent of people really educating themselves via the internet is a key part of buyer behavior. So if you look at executives in the buying cycle of something which is a large, important product, maybe they're going to build a large computer system, they're going to buy a whole series of new technology for their business of some type. Executives are involved early. And when they're deciding what the issues are, setting the strategy and stuff, you can see they're very, very involved early. And this is from 2 different studies. And the 2 studies said the same things. And then when they're out exploring options, deciding which vendors meet the criteria, looking at stuff, examining the alternatives, they get a little bit more involved just when they're making the purchase decision, which is examining the alternatives and planning the implementation. And finally, they're really interested again when they're measuring the results. Okay? So what this tells you is that senior people do a lot of stuff. And the reality is, when they start to explore options, senior people have already done tons of research. They've already been looking. So in the olden days, when somebody phoned your company 30 years ago, they were looking for information. When they phone your company today, or they email you or whatever else they're going to do, they are already probably 40 to 50% of the way through their buying decision. They've already done all sorts of research and work. You're just helping answer their questions. There's a whole series of stages a buyer goes through as they decide to engage with your company. Pretend you're the buyer. What are the steps in the buyer's process? Are they aware of us? Are they interested? Have they really sort of chosen what they're going to do? Have we been selected? Are they negotiating with us? All the different stages in the buyer's process for selecting something. So if you look at search, I'll give you a second to take a look at this. There are a lot of different patterns in the buyer's behavior. So what do buyers look at? What are they really interested in as you go through the process? So when they're aware, it's like, okay, what's the problem I have? What are the solutions that work? How do I compare the solutions? What's the brand name here? And then as you move along, they'll go through and they'll be considering different choices. Who's got the best solution? And at the end, what's the brand name? Comes to the top. Nobody ever got fired for buying Microsoft Office. Okay? So you sit down and say, there's a whole series of things which are important at different times. So the very first time somebody contacts your company, they could be trying to figure out if your solution will work. It might be the technical part of the buying team. This is not a person who has any ability to write a check. Remember, you're really early in the buying process. So how many people are involved in buying stuff? And this number is increasing. If you're going to buy something, a big company over 1,000 employees, it's over 21 people are involved in the buying process of B2B. If this is B2G, in other words, government, this number will be even higher. Okay? If there's a lot of people involved, does it take a lot of time? Yes. Okay, so all these things are important considerations. So you'll have a whole bunch of people will be part of it. It's the user, the influencer, who's the actual buyer. So a user could be somebody who uses it. An influencer could be somebody who's making sure it works technically. A buyer could be the CFO. But the decider could be the line of business manager if it's a B2B product. For the summer camp business that I'm in at Max Sailing, the decider is the mother. That's like fathers think they have influence. Good. That's as far as it goes, guys. The decider is the mother most of the time. All right? The user is the child, and they're an influence. The older they get, the more influence the child has in the decision as to what they do in terms of summer camp. All right? It's just a reality that way. And then there's a whole series of other participants in the buying process, understanding how it lines up. Okay, we're going to move into whole product and stuff, but let's take a quick 5-minute break, if we could do that. Take a break for 5 minutes, we'll come back, and we'll get into kind of the more interesting part, execution, whole product, positioning, pricing, and a little bit about internet marketing. Okay? So we're going to talk about kind of the 3 parts of product marketing. We could go forward a bit. Oh, I can do that. We'll talk about whole product, then positioning, and then finally pricing is 3 of the components in product marketing. So one of the key things about whole product is, what do I have to have for my whole product to work? You know, are people going to be able to buy the whole thing, and are the tangible or intangible elements required by the target market? And you can express this in a whole different sort of series of ways. So if I have a really good product and it fits the market really well, it may not actually work. So I think we've all heard the term, the greatest thing since sliced bread. So the guy who invented sliced bread never took it to market. One of the things he didn't do is he didn't put it in a plastic bag or even in a wax paper bag. Because he didn't bag it, it actually went stale faster than unsliced bread. So it didn't work. So his whole product wasn't just the bread, it was the packaging as well. So if I have the partners, you know, and sometimes if I have a big partner, everything is good. So I may have nice little applications, nobody cares about them, but if they're in the Apple store, then all of a sudden my partnership with Apple validates everything, and that makes it an awful lot easier for people to download and use my product. So when I look at it, there's a whole series of complementary services or complementary products. And as I said earlier on, nobody ever got fired for buying Microsoft Office. And one of the reasons is they have all of the other things all the way around the corner that are important. So they have pre-sale service, they have post-sale service and support, a lot of the things. And one of the key things for early stage companies is to figure out, I don't have to build all this myself. I can get a lot of it from a partner. So when I go and put it all together, what's really interesting to a customer can be a product of not just you, but a product of the partners and all the other pieces that are wrapped into that product at the same time. So one of the best examples is Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. So what's Dunkin' Donuts the equivalent of in Canada? It's Tim Hortons. So Dunkin' Donuts, big popular, donut chain down in the US. So a number of years ago, Dunkin' Donuts sat down and said, we're getting eroded by this Starbucks company. We've got to figure out how to compete. We have to figure out what people value in the 2 different companies. And one of the things they did is they took 100 Starbucks people and said, we want you to go to Dunkin' Donuts for a month, and we'll give you a prepaid card. And they took 100 Dunkin' Donuts guys and said, we want you to go to Starbucks for a month, we'll give you a prepaid card, and then we'll come back, we'll interview everybody and see what they think. So at the end of the month, how many of the 200 people do you think switched? Who's got a number? What do you think? Yeah. 5? 5. Okay. Who else has got a number? Half? 20? Who else? What else? All of them switched? They all, no, actually, what's interesting is 5 is actually pretty close. The real number is 0. Nobody switched. We all go, well, that's really interesting. And then they started to interview the people and said, I wonder why didn't they switch? And it was fascinating. So all the Starbucks guys were like, well, I go there, and there's all these guys who are in cat hats, and there's Formica tables, and all they want is to sell you a double-double or a triple or whatever else it is. And all the donuts have sugar on them and everything else. And lots of pickup trucks parked outside. And they go, okay, that's interesting. Didn't make any comment about the coffee. Then they went to the Dunkin' Donuts guys and said, what do you think? And they go, well, I go there, and they don't have tables, they have all these sofas. And, it's interesting, they can't even sell you a small, medium, or a large. And one guy said, put it his way, he said, it's like spending Christmas with people you don't know. Was his description of Starbucks. So it turned out that they're 2 totally different tribes. Okay, one group of people like to go to Starbucks because they're part of the Starbucks, image and mantra. And then others go to Dunkin' Donuts because they're part of what the call it the ambiance of Dunkin' Donuts is. And it turns out that they're mutually different groups. So the thing that's important here is that it's the whole atmosphere. It's not actually the cup of coffee, it's all the other things that are part of the store. And that's one of the important ways for people to think of it, is what's the full experience that goes into it. So you can ask yourself a bunch of questions. What other services must be acquired? Do I need additional hardware or software? If I'm selling something, that is going to require a mobile device, I know Darcy is here he needs to have iBeacons placed everywhere, otherwise his product doesn't work. All right, he needs to go out and sell these pieces of hardware, otherwise nobody else is going to be able to use the stuff. And will the customer get the full return on investment if they buy all the pieces? It's not just the return on investment for my product by itself, it's the ROI for the whole thing. All right, so is your sales process going to work? And is this going to create customer satisfaction from the total cost of ownership? Then how do you market the whole product? And how do you make sure people understand that there is evidence of the whole product solution? One of the key things you're interested in doing is building a reference base. And say, if people are really interested, they tell me that they want this, they buy it in conjunction with something else, it works really well. So if I look at Amazon as an example, Amazon works because it's got a really good interface. I'm able to find what I want really quickly. I'm able to buy it the way I like to buy, with a credit card or with PayPal, and they ship it to me immediately. All right? It's got the whole product built really, really well. So it's really easy to use, and people say, I like it because it's simple and it matches the way people want to live their lives every day. All right, I'm going to go on to positioning from whole product. This is the really fun part, in my opinion. Any questions about whole product before I move on? Have we got anything online? No? Okay, let's talk a bit about positioning. And it's got a bunch of definitions. My wife drives a very safe car. What kind of car does she drive? A Volvo. My wife happens to be Swedish. So when was the last time Volvo won a safety award? It's not in the 70s. It's more recent than that, but not lots. But the positioning and the imprint of our minds of what is Volvo, it's not considered a sporty or stylish car. It's a safe car. All right, that's its positioning. Something that's really important that way. So one of the big things here with positioning is, why will they buy from us versus our competition? And you can look at it a number of different ways and say it's managing the presentation of the product to fit a position in the mind of the person who's buying it. So positioning is, it just tells you that's where it fits. It is also really a product of market segmentation, each segment of the market. And I differentiate my product enough that everybody understands where it fits in the spectrum of products that are available. It can be perceived status. I can have relationships. I can do all sorts of different things that sort of creates the positioning of the product in the marketplace. When I do this, there's a whole series of things that come in. If I'm trying to advertise my product as a premium product and I price it as a discount product, is that going to work? No, they're contradictions. So it's a combination of, who are my partners? What's my pricing? Is my company well respected? Is the whole product there? All the pieces are there. Do I have service and support? Is my distribution really good? You can get it everywhere. All those things add to the product positioning and add to the image that my product has in the marketplace. Whole sorts of things like this are really important. So when I'm trying to position the product, I go and do market research. I understand how things are. I pick my segments. I can use demographics and psychographics and channels. I really also want to make sure I've got the correct use case. So if I'm using just statistical information, it's not the same thing as knowing exactly who the end user is. I'll differentiate it, okay? A lot of the time people will understand how things are differentiated. So Microsoft Office succeeded. It was the second best word processor. It was the second best statistical product for doing mathematical calculations. It was the second best ability to do presentations. But when you put all three of them together, it was the one product that had all three in one. And because of that, it was competitively differentiated. That's the key thing, is everybody wanted it in one bundle of products. I'll test, I'll do my positioning statement, I'll sit down, I'll take a look at it and see if it's reinforced in the marketplace. Is that what people think it is, right? Is it going to work out well? Is it going to succeed in the market? So you can actually go through a process and say, how do you describe your product to potential customers? Who do we sell to? What's the need? What do we do? How is it differentiated? What are all the pieces that are in it? And then finally, I'll have a positioning statement. And I can take my criteria on one side and turn it into 6 sentences. And when you do that, you're able to say, for my target customer. I go back to the beginning. If I don't know which segments I'm trying to target, it's difficult to do this really well, and I end up with vague mush that doesn't make sense. You want to be specific. All right? So I go through this for who our product is, that unlike our product and has differentiation. Sometimes it suggests that you explain the product at the beginning. If it's really hard to figure out what your product is, maybe you say our product is for who, that, unlike, and then the differentiation as it comes last again. So here's an example, the iPod. Where you get a chance to read that one. When do you think that was written?
4 or 5.
When did they actually release the iPod, the very first one?
99.
I think the first one came out in 2000, 2001. Yeah, so they wrote this 2 years before the product was ever launched and ever hit the street. And they decided in advance that's what it was going to be. So, and then they decided they weren't going to deviate from it. So they had really decided one of the key things that was important there. What's the big differentiator in the positioning when you read this?
Entire music system.
Yeah. So the differentiation is the entire music library integrated to a service where you can buy it online, which is iTunes. I mean, I have 2 kids. I bought one of my kids. I didn't buy it at the beginning. I bought a couple years later when I could afford it. I bought one of my kids an iPod, and I bought the other one a Rio, I think. And I threw the Rio away after a week because I needed a PhD in computer science to get the music on the stupid thing. So a lot of people paid a lot of money for the convenience of iTunes and the fact that it worked. And they actually paid for music again that they already owned, either in a CD or in an album or some other format. So one of the key things here is that the differentiation was a product of hardware and an online service. And it really comes across, and it's a really good example. We have to remember, too, when you look at this, it's for mobile, high-income individuals. Anybody buy one at the beginning? How much did you pay? Yeah, $600, $700. Okay, so it was sold to the same people that bought BlackBerries at the beginning. It was people who are mobile, high income, because they couldn't go and build 10 million of them. They didn't know how well it was going to sell. So they positioned it as a product for high-end individuals who could store music. Later on, they were able to sell it to all the masses and teenagers and everybody else and do all sorts of stuff. They also released it only in 4 cities. So it was released in Greater San Francisco, Austin, Texas, New York, and I believe Chicago. Right? They didn't sell it in Iowa. And like Canada didn't make the grade at the beginning. They went where the early adopters were, the people they thought would be the first people to buy it. Okay, and then they positioned it to fit that market. Oh, just as an aside, when did sales of iPods really take off? Like, you're correct, it came into the marketplace 2001 or so. When did it really take off? What year? 2003 or 4. Why? Sorry? The store was open, but the store was open earlier. The store was always open. iTunes was always open, but all of a sudden adoption took off. This is a whole product question. When you first bought it, you had to have a Mac. All of a sudden they released iTunes for Windows, and everybody else, like 80% of the market, could use it. That's when it really took off. That's when the price dropped. Okay? So here's Starbucks, Howard Schultz. Just read through that. Did he talk about the coffee at all? Not really. Okay, one of the things he does, which is good, is he doesn't compare himself to Dunkin' Donuts or one of the other chains, because that's hard to do, especially if you're a little company. Oh, we're better than IBM. That's a difficult thing to do. He compares himself to the old way of doing things, which is drip coffee in a plastic cup. So he compares himself to the olden days, and that's always more palatable. Okay. FedEx. You look at it, the brand promise, the market category, the positioning. Where is it? What's the tagline? Where do you see the tagline? It's on the door. The world on time. You don't have to have the same positioning for the whole time in your company. What was the very first tagline for FedEx when they first came into the marketplace? It was when it absolutely positively has to get there. They were defining themselves as an in North America courier company that would ship stuff overnight for you. Here they're defining yourself as the world on time. Now they've gone out and bought Office Depot, or not Office Depot, but Kinko's and some of the other companies. They're becoming a worldwide office supply company. So they're redefining themselves with new positioning statements all the time. I won't play these. I think everybody understands what they are. Very, very clear positioning between the two different groups. Apple Macintoshes versus the Windows PC. So one of the things I would suggest to everybody is you spend some time before you go into New Ventures BC really writing this out, and then read it to some people that you respect. And if they don't understand what you're talking about, you got to rewrite it. All right? So this is something you can always work on. Make sure it's clear. And if you are going to sell to 10 segments, I think you have a problem. But if you're going to sell to, let's say, one segment, you may have one positioning statement for the end consumer and one positioning statement for the channel partner. In other words, if I have to sell via, let's say, the Fraser Health system, because I have a health care product, I have a positioning statement for the partner that helps me in the marketplace, and I have a positioning statement for the end user. Element's a great positioning. It fits all sorts of things that are really positive about your company, and it fits all sorts of different things. It's really hard to say we're going to go and compete with Fortune 100 companies, and we're going to sell to the biggest law firms and stuff down on, in Wall Street and everything else, when, you're 6 guys who like to play table tennis in a small office in Vancouver. It doesn't necessarily fit. So one of the biggest things you can do is say, when you write all this out, and you say, this is my positioning statement, can you substitute the product, somebody else's name in there, and it sort of fits? So if your positioning statement also applies to IBM, it's not precise enough. That's one of the key things there. One of the key things is value proposition, which is the same as compelling reason to buy, and the key differentiator need to match. So if you're trying to say, this is why this group of people will buy from me, this is one of the things that I have to get correct. Otherwise, I'm really mismatching what their needs are with what I'm doing in the marketplace. Any questions about positioning? It's interesting, it's a science, and it's something you can figure out, but something that has to be measured very clearly. We'll come back to measurement afterwards. We'll really try to understand how people measure. Are people reacting the right way to what I'm doing in terms of the different things? We'll look at pricing. There's all sorts of different things happen with pricing. It's really hard to do market research. If you go to a bunch of consumers, I go to Don and say, Don, would you like to pay $10 for my product or $5? What do you think he's going to say? It's $5, right? So it's really difficult to do. So one of the things I have to figure out is, how does he value my product? So if I use value as a surrogate, I can understand how I will price things. All right, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Is there a price ceiling? People won't pay more than this. What's normal in the marketplace? What's the value proposition? What's my reputation? I have limited reputation in the marketplace compared to a big company, and what's the total cost of ownership? And I'll go through a whole series of things and say, I have to decide in my company how I want to position the product long term. If I decide I want to be a premium product and I'm going to build the best product over time, my pricing strategy has to match that. And it has to match the demands of the marketplace. One of the things we look at is there anybody here who likes to fly first class in airplanes? We all like to do it. You pay for it all the time?
I've never flown that way, but it'd be amazing.
I know. So we'd all love to do it, but the problem is we won't pay for it. So very simple market research by the airlines has proven that we don't mind if they lose our bags. We don't mind if there's no food. We don't mind if the stewardess is really, or whoever it is who's working on the plane has trouble figuring out how to close the doors, as long as it's cheap, okay? People vote with their wallets. In the airline industry, it's very price sensitive. There's other things which are not price sensitive. But the external factors are what's the nature of the market, how do they compete? All sorts of things are important in the marketplace. You can put together a really bit of a model and say, is there demand? What's the price ceiling? People won't pay more than this. What's the price floor? In other words, what are my costs? I have to at least recover my cost. So I can price somewhere in a range. All you got to do is go and look in a Safeway store. Let's say you're looking at jam, and there's a range of price for different types of jam. We have no idea whether it's better or worse inside the jar, but it's very clear that there's different price ranges. And maybe it's the label or something, but there is certain types of competition and what is the appropriate price range for the product. One of the ways of looking at it, and there's a really interesting company called Leverage Point that specializes in this. So if you want to look up a company called Leverage Point, it's got some excellent videos and other things that helps you understand things. So when you look at it, you have what's your differentiation in value. So maybe in my case, my differentiation in value is, we'll say arbitrarily $10. I have a consumer product. I'm good at it. And what's your negative differentiation? There's some things my competitor always does better. Maybe that's minus $5. And then perhaps there's something else I could buy which is cheaper, which is $2. I can come through this match and say, this is my range of prices that are available to me. Okay? So maybe XL is the price of the competitive alternative. I have a really good project management price. I don't do quite as much as all my competitors, but my differentiation means that I can offer in the marketplace my project management product, knowing that people will get, after a while, say, I just can't do this in Excel anymore. I got to do something that's better, right? I can figure out how to price it using this model. Whole series of things, different market size segments. Am I able to use whole product? Have I got everything in there? What's the ROI? My positioning? I'll take a look at demand, and if you can find a demand curve, you're smarter than me because I really don't know what it is. But one of the key things is to choose a pricing model, set your objectives, and select your pricing. I think we also have here a series of real big or common pricing errors. The customer really can't understand why you're different. Okay, it's really hard to charge a premium when it's that. The competitor, really it's hard to compare yourself and to win. Okay, that isn't good. It means you're not differentiated enough. There's no clear or consistent strategy, and the value is not communicated. So one of the things we suggest to people is a lot of times people say, when I go into the marketplace, I have to be less expensive or people won't buy my product. That's wrong. Okay, because you get to set your initial product once. And when you price it at the beginning, you want to have a really good product. Maybe you have what's called introductory pricing. And software as a service or software as a service business models lead to this really, really well. I'll give you the first 3 months for free. You can trial it for 3 months, and then if things are going well, then you start to pay the full price. Introductory pricing allows you to secure initial customers without having a low-cost product, because it's very difficult to change once you're in the marketplace with a low-cost product. Questions about pricing? Good. I want to move on to a little bit about social media because it's an interesting topic, but then I also want to segue into how it's just one of the parts that's part of the toolkit for people who are trying to market different types of products. So one of the things we know is that there's a whole series of platforms, and every month you can get a new one of these diagrams and it gets more and more complex. all right? Each social media is not one thing, it's a whole series of things. There's a whole bunch of different products that do a whole series of different things. But we do know that 93% of all business-to-business marketers are engaged in some form of social media. And when you look at the popular channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, there's all sorts of stuff. And each one of them targets a different market or different part of the market. Each one of them does different things. And when you look at what people say my marketing plan is, you'll say, I'm going to advertise through these channels, or I'm going to use these different types of social media for it to work. So these are neat. I've listed a bunch of consumerish ones, but it could be that if you're in a distinct industrial segment, that there are some newsletters, or there's an industry association, or there's some bloggers, or there's a couple of events, or there's some really well-known things in a specific vertical market that are really important. It doesn't always have to be just mainstream, okay? It works that way, and that's one of the things that's important. These stats are a couple years old, but you look at the numbers, they go up. And one of the key things now is that there's billions and billions of videos evolved every day, and there's a whole series of, we use video a lot more than we used to years ago. Each one of the tools does something different. I can have social platforms that are ubiquitous. I can publish. I can use them for networking. I can use them for having effective discussions. I can use them to share information. So YouTube is a great way to share. LinkedIn is a great way to facilitate discussion and to meet people who are part of something that's like that. All right? One of the things you can do with LinkedIn is you can say, well, I'm really interested in publishing companies, and you can figure out the names of 20 different publishing companies. It's really easy to harvest off LinkedIn all the people who've registered from those publishing companies on LinkedIn. And if you work at it, you can get all their contact info. So it's one of the great sources of who's who inside a company. There's all sorts of different tools that you can use in either B2B or B2C. So if you're going to use a lot of the tools, there are some that are really good for social media and some that work. And I'm going to slowly but surely segue into the internet stuff here, but at the bottom you'll see Kissmetrics, HubSpot, and Hootsuite. There's another one, Crazy Egg, I'd add to that list, which are really good for managing and helping you monitor not just social media, but all aspects of internet stuff. When I look at this, you can say, Alexa, what's my internet ranking? Do I do well? What are my Google Analytics? And the analytics package you get from Google for free is better and better. And a lot of companies will spend a great deal of time optimizing around that. Oops. I'll skip that one anyways. One thing which is going out of vogue, I'll put up is, as I said earlier on, I have a sailing school, is we have coupon through Living Social and Groupon. Max Sailing has a really good group offer on Groupon right now. How many of you have seen it? Probably means the equal number have purchased it, I bet. Okay. So electronic couponing companies are declining. Okay. Some things work, some things don't work. So 3 or 4 years ago, they were a great way to introduce products. Nowadays, they're not as active as they are. So what's happening is not that necessarily that they're declining, but 3 or 4 years ago, somebody said, which social media platforms are there? There were a couple. Now there's a whole series of them. So there's lots and lots of competition. It's like advertising. There's lots and lots of chatter. All right? In other words, they're getting crowded. It's harder to go out and say, oh, I'm really making a difference in just one of them, because everybody does it. Question?
Isn't it a spam law in not allowed?
Sorry?
It's a spam law in Canada, you're not allowed to send email.
Right. So there's spam really also applies to mostly to sending email.
When you say target market,
Oh, so in this case, in this coupon, Living Social, in this example, had 70,000 emails that they sent to people in the city of Vancouver. So if I put a deal out through Living Social, they would send that deal out a couple times to 70,000 households. I don't have anywhere near that reach as a sailing school. I have an email list of probably about maybe 2,000 past customers. So people have opted in to Living Social's email thing. The question is today whether people pay attention and whether that many have still opted in or whether they've opted out. But you're correct. You can't just go and harvest stuff. So if I want all the emails from LinkedIn, a lot of people will put it in. You can connect to them. And once you're connected, it'll show you their full contact information. People have the choice of putting that and making it available. So there are lots of ways of doing things legally versus, as this gentleman has pointed out, illegally. So one of the things I'd like to do is I'll just take a look now. We'll sort of close off with something on metrics and analytics, because it's something that's really, I think, one of the more important things to work at when you're doing stuff. And I think this is something that people need to do irregardless of the type of company they have. I use an example of a sailing school. It's a very simple community-based school. We spend a lot of time making sure that people can find us. And the way people look for stuff now is on the internet. There is a great book that you can get for free called Internet Marketing, and it's the essential step-by-step guide to internet marketing. And it's by a company called HubSpot. They give it away. They recently just distributed it or redistributed it. And it has 6 essential steps to internet marketing success. This is free. You go to their website, you can download it in exchange for your email. They also have some of the best internet emails or internet newsletters with tips on how to do things. So HubSpot is a really good source. It's an ebook. You can get all sorts of information for free. And it walks you through all the different steps, as we say there. So why? So put this diagram up. It's something that Rocket Builders likes as a diagram. It's called the marketing round. The items in yellow are a lot of the traditional marketing things that you do that are analog. They aren't necessarily digital. So I can go to events. I can do public relations. I can have corporate communication. I can do mail-outs. All right? Then there's a whole series of digital things. Some of them are together. I can advertise either digitally or I can advertise, let's say, in the newspaper. I can do both. So it crosses the two of them. I could spend a lot of time with search engine advertising or marketing. I can be very active on social media, and I have to be targeted if I do that. I can email market. I can have really compelling content on my website. I can optimize for search engine stuff. I can optimize for mobile. And I can make sure I have a web presence. I'm active on all the right places. So if I'm interested in the oil and gas industry, there are certain industry associations, periodicals, and associations, and different newsletters that everybody goes to. Same thing with events. That's where I need to focus my effort. I don't need to put it on Facebook because the guys in the oil and gas industry may not necessarily be watching. So when I look at this, there's a whole series of things. If you wanted to do a whole bunch of a lot of everything on that wheel, do you have enough money? Small companies don't have enough money to do everything that's there. So you have to choose, what am I going to do? I have tons and tons of marketing opportunity. I have to be specific and make sure I know what I'm going to focus on. So, one of the things you have to ask yourself is, what is my business going to be? Most startups turn into a small business, all right? They aren't necessarily scalable. And you can figure out what the business model is. So I use the example of the sailing school. I can figure those things out really, really quickly. And I know it's a simple service-based business. It's not at all disruptive. But I have to market via the internet. Otherwise, I won't find new customers because that's how people shop today. It doesn't matter whether you're in the internet business or whether in the summer camp business or something else. That's how you shop. So there's a really interesting company that we've spent some time with in the Kootenays. It's a company that's called Enviromat, and it supplies really, really high-quality, large wood mats that are put down in construction sites in the far north. And each one of these mats is 30 feet by 30 feet. And in some places, they'll deploy 10,000 of them to really make sure the earth doesn't get degraded when all the heavy equipment and stuff is moving around and everything else. They have a whole series of things that they have to do when you look at the different options that are there. So I ask him, I say, what fits your market and why? So he spent a fair bit of time saying, well, I'm not going to email, but I have to have the right content on my website. So when somebody who's interested in what I do, and they have a special technology that goes with the mats, it's not just the mat, it also has the ability for people to find it. All right, so it has some tagging capability. What they really need is a web presence and some content, but they also have to do analog stuff. He said, you have to remember that all the decisions for the industry that I'm in are made by offices in certain areas. And he said, there's a technical buyer, there's a person who's in the field who deals with this every day, and then there are people who have financial decisions. So my web content, my testimonials, my ROI calculator are all part of my website. It's for the guys who are in the field. One of the best things I ever did was purchase billboard advertising where they drive by with their truck every day. He said, so I have a mixture of digital and I have analog. The billboard, which reminds them every single day that I'm available in the marketplace, is important. And then he said, I also know that I want the foreman who has to say yes or no to talk to me. So he says, my partner will go up to the job sites really regularly. He says, show up at 11:30 with 10 pizzas on the seat of your truck and hand them out to all the guys that work in the place. You get to talk to the foreman. It's guaranteed. So there's a whole series of things you have to understand to do with the marketing round. And when you make decisions about how am I going to internet market, it's really important to decide what will really make a difference for your company. So I go back to the sailing school and say, well, we do a number of things. We go on a couple of events. We do a direct mail out every year, and it's cost us about $300. We still do it. And we get registrations afterward, mostly from grandmothers, okay, because they don't do the internet. We do a bit of email marketing to people who are past customers. Our unsubscribe rate is less than 0.5%, so we're obviously not offending that many people. We spend a fair bit of time on social media, but the biggest things we've done in the last year is to work on our web presence and our content. When people go to the website, they have to be able to find what they're really looking for. And if they go to the website and they're not interested in selling lessons, it's good if they go somewhere else. I want them to self-select. It's really important. Something we haven't done that we need to do more of is optimize for mobile. So Google did change to the algorithm about a week ago. So a lot of people's rankings have changed. Has anybody experienced that? Rankings have changed. Ours has changed. It's dropped. Our website is not optimized for mobile. And Google has stated in the last week that optimization for mobile will be one of its key criteria going forward. So if your website is super clunky and you can't see it on an iPhone, it means that you will be less likely to be found by the Google search engine, something that's important to follow and understand. So you can have all sorts of metrics that you're going to use on the web. So if I'm talking about money, what's my average order size? Something called customer lifetime value, LTV, lifetime value. Somebody buys from me once, they're likely to come back a second time, maybe even a third time. What will each of those transactions be like? At the sailing school, somebody takes one course, 40% of them will take a second one. I'm not a club, they will not join. All right, so I can calculate what my lifetime value of a customer is. What's the average time to first order? If I'm in the business to business market, you know, how does my pipeline grow? How long does it take me to move people through my pipeline? What's my close rate? And what's my revenue per salesperson or employee? If you have a reasonable sized company in the city of Vancouver with 30 employees, it's cash flow neutral. Approximately how much revenue do you think you're going to need to have? 3 million? It's about that. It's about $100,000 per employee. If they're really well educated, high quality people, it's even higher. Okay? It's not always everybody makes $10,000 a year and lives in their parents' basement for 17 years. Okay? It doesn't necessarily work that way all the time. Okay? One of the best things to do is something called Pirate Metrics, and this comes from a guy called Dave McClure, 500 startups. He invests in 500 companies per year. It's called Pirate Metrics because of what? What does that stand for? R. Yeah, okay. Acquisition, activation, referral, retention, and revenue. R. All right, so that's what pirates say. So in reality, what you're doing is you're talking about in terms of the internet, how do I acquire people? How do I activate them, get them to do something? Then, how do I retain them? How do I get them maybe to do a referral for me? And then finally, how do I get revenue from them? I measure at each step. And one of the key things is that I want to be able to understand what my conversion rates are from step to step. And this comes from KISS Metrics. KISS Metrics is a company from Seattle. Really interesting, different stuff. A gentleman called Neil Patel is the CEO, and he actually be one of the speakers at something called the Traction Conference. I'll talk a bit more about that at the end. So you can also, though, get vanity metrics, all right? Web traffic, unique visitors, return rate, subscribers. The thing that's important is everything above the line is about traffic. It's not about money. So if I convert them into paying customers and then I have low churn, it means I get to make a fair bit of money. So just getting web traffic all by itself isn't good enough. You have to get the right web traffic and you have to convert it into finance, and it has to convert into something that's going to work for you. Give the time, Don. So it's something that's really important to try to figure out, what are the metrics that are really important to you? Because I can have, let's say I'm the company Enviromat up in the interior, I could have thousands of people in Silicon Valley looking at my website, but they're not going to buy my product. It doesn't matter. So there's a really neat example. Do you have the time? 8:55. Okay, so we got a couple more minutes. Is the technician guy there? Could you just click on that web link real quick? So you look at it and you sort of see what it is. Could you scroll down a little bit, please? What does it look like? It's Amazon, right? So maybe you could just go back up to the top, okay? So it's a guy who's a web developer who built his online resume to look just like Amazon. He's offering himself for sale. So 5 stars, also bought with running shoes and an airline ticket. Really cool thing. So his name's Phil Dubois, and this was a really popular website January about 2 years ago, so just over 2 years ago. And he became one of the top, it went viral because people thought it was cute. So he became one of the top 1,000 websites in the world for about a week and a half. He had more web traffic than a lot of countries. And if you look at it, look at the likes on Facebook, he's got 42,000 likes on Facebook. He also was really good. When it was going on, you could go and click and he would tell you where all his web traffic was coming from. He would also tell you that he didn't have a job yet. He'd also say, I want to work in the United States, that's what I'd like to do. So we'd have all this web traffic from Eastern Europe and go, this stuff is useless to me, I'm never going to get a job there. So this is a really good example of vanity metrics. It's really nice, but it's fluff. It doesn't get you what you really want. So you can have all sorts of traffic that doesn't count. Actually, can we go back to the PowerPoint, please? Yeah, so if we go back to, he wanted a job. He ended up getting a really neat job, went in the US and stuff. Does the web traffic help him? He had over 200 million unique visitors and stuff, but it took him 5 months to get the job offer that he wanted. So that's, you don't necessarily, everything isn't just traffic. So if you want to get metrics, you've got a whole series of really neat products, Kissmetrics, Hootsuite, HubSpot. There's another one called Marketo that is really good, and also Crazy Egg, a whole series of products that are really good. And each one of them does something different. My belief is that for managing your content, HubSpot is really, really good for content. Managing social media, Hootsuite is the product you want to have. I like it. For really understanding how people use your website, Kissmetrics is really good too. Okay, and each one of them does something different. But all of them are pretty good products. One of the things I would say is pick one and get good at using it rather than do all of them. Otherwise, you'll spend all your time screwing around with statistics and you won't learn anything. So one of the things you're trying to do is once you get a little bit of data is understand what's my cost of customer acquisition, cost to acquire a customer, how much time and effort does it take me to do that, and what's my long-term value of the customer? Are they going to buy from me once, twice, 3 times, or 4 times? And if you can find it, there's a great study put together, or a great PowerPoint put together by a company called Beyond the Rack. And it's the CEO of Beyond the Rack explaining how they measured this all the time as the company grew, trying to understand how do we figure out whether when somebody comes back to our website, as well as selling them a shirt, I also need to be offering them a pair of pants. What number of people will convert and do both of them? Okay, so as I said before, there's a great book on internet marketing. It's offered by HubSpot, really easy to find. All you got to do is search for it on the internet. all of these guys, somebody from each one of those companies plus a bunch of the others will be coming for the Traction Conference that is in Vancouver, June 18th. It's sponsored by a number of different groups. It's a one-day event where it'll have, I think, probably one of the best lineup of speakers for internet marketing in the city of Vancouver in the whole year. So I'll close with that. There's a couple other great books if you want to take a look at the PowerPoint deck. The one on the right-hand side, which is the Startup Owner's Manual, is Steve Blank's book. I like that one. If you're having trouble falling asleep late at night, it's also good for that. Okay. And one thing is like 700 pages long. He leaves the best stuff for the last 3 pages of every chapter. So if you don't want to read the whole thing, just read the end of every chapter. Okay, so that's good. And as I said before, this is how you can connect with me, and that's everything. Thank you very much, folks. Great. Are there any questions? There will be time for us to talk offline. I'll be here for a while, so if people want to come and speak a little bit one-on-one, welcome to do that. If there's anybody out in Cyberland that has a question, they can easily ask now or send me an email. Happy to get into an email conversation with anybody who's not inside the wooden Stonehenge this evening. Good. Thanks again. Great. Yep.
Perfect. Sorry. So everybody, thank you so much for coming, and let's give Dave another big round of applause.